Now loading this month's Leadership Live, where we dive in deep with today's top MedTech leaders, allowing you the chance to learn from the best. Leadership Live starts now.
Well, hello, Floodgate family, and welcome to this edition of Leadership Live. And I'm absolutely ecstatic to have one of the industry great leaders, Jim Hartman, who's the Chief Commercial Officer of Cleerly, here to join us to talk not only a little about Cleerly, but all the lessons he's learned in leadership so we can gain some of that knowledge. Jim, thanks so much for joining us on Leadership.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to speak with you.
Yeah, well, I've had the blessing of getting to know you and talk to you several times and know Cleerly, but people listening probably aren't as lucky. So first, give us a little background about yourself, and then I'd love to hear about some of the great things you guys have going at Cleerly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I think about my background in medical device specifically, I started my career at Guidant, as a cardiac surgery rep, way around 2005. Went through the Boston Scientific acquisition with them, and then ultimately spent 12 and a half years with the organization and was their VP of sales for cardiac surgery and cardiology. Then decided for me, really to change up in my career. I wanted to jump into the startup world. So I joined Livongo to build out their health system team, went through the IPO with them, and then went through the Teladoc acquisition with them. And then decided to, wanted to do it all over again. So cardiology has been something that's near and dear to me for multiple reasons. My dad died of heart disease. My mom's had a heart attack. And so when I talk about Cleerly, for people that aren't familiar with it, I think I describe it as, think about Cleerly as the mammogram of the heart. We're utilizing artificial intelligence essentially to diagnose heart disease as early as possible so that you can work with your doctor to treat it. Ultimately, our mission is to create a world without heart attacks. So, when you think about the women in your family that get a mammogram, why do they do it? They want to catch cancer as early as possible. God forbid that they have it. They want to treat it as early as possible to prevent the downstream effects. We're doing the exact same thing with imaging with heart disease, which, as we know, is the number one killer in America.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's incredible impact. And I love that analogy of like being able to catch it early enough so you can do something to prevent it instead of waiting till it's symptomatic. You're in an ER with chest pains, right? Which is where a lot of people find out about it for the first time.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about it, Joe, is like 50% of all heart attacks that happen with no prior symptoms whatsoever. So like the heart attack is the first symptom that a lot of people have. And unfortunately, with close to 1 million heart attacks a year, if those people aren't right next to a hospital, a lot of those people unfortunately die. And it's something that's totally preventable. And we have the technology to be able to do it.
That's incredible. That's really incredible, impactful. Now, you've spent many years in the MedTech space, for big companies. You've done the startup, you've done the IPO. So I'm sure you've been around a lot of great leaders. I consider you a great leader in this space. What are the attributes?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, what are the attributes that you think make a great leader in this space?
I mean, for me, and I've been blessed to work with some really great leaders over the course of my career. I've tried to take something away from every single one of them. The number one thing that I try to live by and that I've learned from them is that integrity is the most important thing. Do what you say you're going to do. Don't cut corners. Treat people fairly. And at the end of the day, like if you can put your head on the pillow at night knowing that you've done right by the organization, you've done right by your employees and by your patients, that's where it all starts, for me. Something that I talk about a lot, within Cleerly is like, are we doing the right thing? Sort of a cliche that I have is say, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And, that's where it all begins. I think the other thing for me as a leader, and again, I know it's another cliche, but it is truly being a servant leader. Like, when to the point, even when people say within Cleerly, like, oh, I work for Hartman, and I'll correct them, to where I'll say, no, you don't. Like, you don't work for me. Like, if anything, I work for you. Like, I am here to help serve you and to help guide you and develop you. It's not the other way around. And I think those two things in particular, I've had the good fortune to work with some really great leaders.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Start with that integrity of just, doing what you're going to say, try to, live the ethos that you expect of others. Right. And then secondly is being others focused, right? Like I heard something a few years ago of building the business for the people, not hiring the people to build the business.
Yeah.
And looking on that perspective, how do you build, greater people? And that flows into, to me, in MedTech. I mean, we're impacting lives, what you're doing is saving lives. So it has that really cascading effect that I think is really powerful in this space.
No doubt.
So,
yeah, the whole reason that I got into, med tech to begin with. So, my background, it's interesting, prior to healthcare, like I was a bond trader. Like my background was in corporate finance, and I loved a lot about it. But the thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to do something day in and day out that I could see that had a direct impact on people's lives. And, I've been very fortunate within my career to work with some incredible companies, incredible technologies. And to me, when you can look back and say, hey, my technology saved somebody's life, my technology made somebody's life better, there's nothing better for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now you've, been with companies that have had great cultures. You've, Livongo, you guys are in a growth stage. You're in a growth company now. One of the key elements is building that culture. So how do you first create it? And then maybe when you're looking back at some of the companies you've been at, how do you sustain it, maintain it? What tips would you give to people?
Yeah, I think it all starts with the mission of the company itself. It's like, when I hire people, I say, I look at three things, and those three categories are skill, will, and fit. What have they done in their career? Why are they joining Cleerly? And what's the cultural fit for them? But it all starts with that mission. You mentioned Livongo, where we were focused on chronic conditions, started out focused on diabetes. Well, over a third of the 900 employees there were living with diabetes. So it was like they were living and breathing it day in and day out. Similar with Cleerly, right? Everybody knows somebody who's either had a heart attack or died from heart disease. And, it all starts there. Our mission is to create a world without heart attacks because we know this is totally preventable. And I think how you maintain that culture, and you're right, it gets more difficult over time as you become a large organization. When I joined Cleerly 4.5 years ago, we were 30 employees. Now we're over 300 and going to 400, next year. But I think it starts with the quality of people that you hire, and then ultimately, like, what is their why? Why are they joining Cleerly? Because I tell people right up front, I'm like, look, this job is freaking hard, right? Like, you're going to wake up on certain days and you're going to think to yourself, like, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
But, every time you do wake up, what you will never ask yourself is what I'm doing meaningful? And as long as you continue to demonstrate that within the organization, that we are here for the patient and here to save lives, I think it's a great attribute to maintaining that culture.
I think that's some great examples of being able to start with the people you're bringing on board to make sure they have an alignment in the why, of that mission out of the gate, because they got to see that, especially when times get hard. Yep. And then second, really, making sure there is that fit, as you say. We call it attitude, right? But that fit, that cultural, that works together. So I think those are a couple of really good things, especially as you start to scale, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And reminding people of that mission over time, because how quickly we get into, did that product ship? Did that doctor, and that looking back and looking at that impact, especially in healthcare, where someone can tie it to a family member or to themselves, is powerful.
Yeah. And I think people realize, like, when they come in, like, look, this is freaking hard, right? Like, anytime you're doing a paradigm shift, which is exactly what we're doing when it comes to how heart disease is diagnosed. For years, it's been like stress tests and EKGs and cholesterol. And like, if all of those things were super effective, guess what? There wouldn't be 1 million people dying every year from heart disease. Like, so, but it still is hard to make that shift. One of the things I definitely look for when you talk about hiring and that culture is, I use an example with them to where I'd say, like, look, if you're looking for a place where the recipe is totally baked, and you're just looking on the box, on the back of the box to bake the cake, I'm like, this is not it. Like, that is not a startup. That is not a scale up. We may have 65% of the recipe figured out, but, we need people, good people, smart people, driven, motivated to help us figure out that other 35%. So the key attributes are that grit and determination of, like, we may not have all the answers, but, by God, like, we're going to figure it out together. And one of the things that I often encourage my team is, like, it's okay to fail. Like, I would much rather you fail trying new things and figure out what doesn't work than just to sit back and say, like, well, I don't know how to do it. So I think all those things are important with a culture.
I love that. And I love you. It's celebrate the failures because you're trying in the right thing, going forward. Speaking of failures, I know I've had leadership failures. So what are some of those lessons that you might have learned along the hard way that you could share that others don't have to?
Yeah, this goes back to a great boss that I had, early in my career. He was a former military. He was a captain in the Army and just a great guy. And people will tell you, like, about me that I tend to be very type A, very driven, very motivated. And he had a saying with me. He's like, Hartman, you are a hammer. And what you have to realize is not everything is a nail, it's really important to, the Stephen Covey rule, seek first to understand, right? Respond, don't react. Like, people are going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. And like I said, if you're truly celebrating those mistakes, then when those happen, really seek first to understand, like, why a mistake was made. Don't make any assumptions. My father used to tell me all the time, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Like, don't assume, right? So seek first to understand, and respond, don't react. I think those are the key things as a leader, that you create this environment for your employees, for your team, to where they understand, like, hey, when they do fail, it's okay. And, it's not this monumental disaster.
No, I think that's really sage advice. I mean, that hammer and that nail is, you want to lead everyone as you would want to be leaded, right? It's not the golden rule. It's the platinum rule, which is another book, right? How to be able to lead people as they need to be led. I think I know I still struggle with that one. I have to, and then, that second is taking that moment and seeking to understand, and understanding them with that empathy, where they come from. And I've found, if you start there, even on mistakes, that's where people learn more. If you come at it, they start to get defensive and the walls come up, and they don't really learn from it. But if, even if it was a really mistake and you ask why, and they walk through it and they develop it themselves, it now becomes ingrained as not a you did it wrong, but as a way to grow. And so I love both of those attributes. They're just great lessons to learn. And I've been the hammer. I'm a type A guy too.
Exactly. One of the things I would tell you that I constantly encourage our team is, like, look, like, you may not always agree with someone's decision or what their opinion is or what their input is, but I can promise you, like, everybody at Cleerly wants this company to be successful. And they may be coming at it from a different angle, or they may have a different experience. But I always use the analogy, like, no one gets on a plane, like, hoping that pilot fails. All right. Like, everybody wants the pilot to be successful. So, like, no one's coming to the organization wanting the organization to fail. They want to be a part of making this organization successful. So even if they share different things with you or different solutions, and you may not agree with them, at least filter it through, the prism of this person wants this company to succeed, and how can I meet them where they're at to better understand their philosophy.
Yeah. There's some really good, advice. And, we always are looking for people that, are performing, and it's people that drive business, right? And uniquely, there's always those people that are high performers in any business, that 20% that seem to get 80% done.
Right.
So how have you found you develop those high performers over time? What do you do?
I mean, for me, one of the things, and this was from a book, by Marcus Buckingham years ago. One of the takeaways from it was, it was a book called First Break All the Rules. And one of the things that I remember in there where he said, we've all heard the saying, treat people how you would like to be treated. And he's like, that's wrong, as a leader, because you have to treat people how they would like to be treated. And what motivates that person may not necessarily be what motivates you. Some people are motivated by money. Some people are motivated by recognition. Some people are motivated by altruistic reasons. I think it starts with, number one, like finding out why that person wants to join Cleerly and understanding what truly motivates them. Because again, if you're coming at them with carrots that are really meaningless to them, like it's like designing a comp plan and driving the wrong behavior. Like, what is the behavior that you're trying to drive with that person? So understanding that on the front end. And then also, with high performers themselves, I've always had a 4-point philosophy when it comes to hiring. I always say, like, you hire the best people that you possibly can. You give them the resources and the guidance and the feedback that they need to be successful. Wherever possible, you take internal obstacles out of their way. And just as importantly, you get the hell out of their way and let them do their job. Like, you don't hire high performers to sit there and micromanage them. If you've got, I always say, if I've got to micromanage someone, then I've hired the wrong person. So you just, again, understand their why, be clear on what the objectives are, guide them, coach them, and let them run, man. And, that's why they join a startup and a scale up, because they're tired of the bureaucracy of a big corporation, and they want to come in and they want to make a difference. So I think all of those things are at least the approach that I take.
No, I love that 4-point plan of get the right person, give them the right training and resources to be effective, take down the barriers that are in there. That's your number one job. What are the barriers that help? And then empower them to go.
Yeah.
Give them the agency. And I usually find that, great performers want great responsibility. They want that agency to be able to make that change, to make that call, to do the things that, and do it quickly. And that usually keeps them engaged, right? I mean, sitting where I sit, the high performers that have got their eyes open, the number one reason is not comp. Is because they're not challenged.
Yeah. It's, often it's said, like, people don't leave companies, they leave bosses, right? If they don't feel like they're truly supported and challenged and motivated, like, they're going to move on, particularly high performers, right? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So those high performers are crucial with an organization. So you mentioned a couple things earlier about, finding the will, et cetera, but this is near and dear to my heart. How do you like to find those great people, and anything more you'd like to add on how you evaluate them, beyond kind of understanding their why?
Yeah. I mean, the best way, of course, is people that I've worked with in the past, right? I mean, to kind of go into the well of, who did I work with at previous organizations, because you saw them in action. You saw them when times were tough and things were challenging, and all the answers weren't there. There was a lot of ambiguity, and you could see how they responded to that. That's number one, as far as like people that I've worked with, and I've had a great, fortune to work with a lot of amazing people. The other thing is, like, go to your best people within the organization and, like, Joe, who do you know that's like you and that would be committed to our mission? Because I want to find people like you, or I want to find people like Amanda or, Sally. That's the go-to easily, right? Because I always say, like, especially as a career sales professional, like, in an interview, everybody can sell themselves, but it's when it really comes down to brass tacks and understanding, like, what were they like in this situation? What were they like in that situation? You don't really know, and one of the things when I go through the hiring process and really hone in on that culture and talent, because it's not just skill and will. And the thing that I hone in on a lot is, like, how are they going to be as far as a fit? I often say hiring at a small company is like dropping a rock into a puddle. And there's ripple effects from that. The person coming in as that rock, and the organization feels it, when that person comes in positively or negatively. And so you've got to make certain that you're putting somebody within an environment that they thrive in. And the best way to do that is either to find people that you've worked with, or go to your best people and say, who do you know that's just like you?
Yeah. No, that referral is powerful. I mean, you can interview, you can do, a lot of the assessments, but spending years working with somebody through challenges, nothing shines a light better than that. So those elements of trust are absolutely crucial. And I like that analogy of the importance of that initial hire in small companies, of that, the ripple effects, because it truly can. That negative person, or we've all seen it where the great person comes in and everything, all of a sudden people start moving faster.
Exactly. Yeah. It like ups everybody else's game of like, oh man, I got to step up. Like this, this lady knows what she's doing, So
Right. Yeah. I mean, everyone likes to be on a team with LeBron James, like it just, they want to be with winners. So it makes total sense. Now, speaking of winners, there's a lot of people that are at a certain level, but they want to go to that next level, right? Yeah. And they want to maybe get to leadership, maybe sit where you sit one day. What do you tell those individuals that are coming up?
What I always tell people that aspire, and they want, whether it's going into their first management position, is like, look, like titles to me don't mean anything. Like, be a leader in the position that you're in now. And if you're a territory manager or you're a clinical account manager, like demonstrate your leadership qualities there. You can be a leader regardless of what your title is. You can be a leader regardless if you're managing a team or not. And so it starts there. One of the things I'd say is that, there's no faster way to get rid of a good rep than make them a bad manager. Like, and not everybody, everybody's, sits there, or I should say a lot of people sit there and say like, hey, I really want to coach, I want to develop. And those are absolutely key parts of being a leader. But, there's also days where, you're a therapist and you're a disciplinarian and you're a recruiter and there's more to it than just coaching and developing. And so really know, what you're asking for, but it all starts with, be a leader in the role that you're in. And then, go to other leaders within the organization and much like I've had the good fortune to do in my career, like what can you learn from them? What are the takeaways? And they're not always positive. Some of them are negative of like, oh, I learned what not to do and I learned what to do. And those are important. Like I tell my team all the time, look, I'm going to make mistakes, but what you're always going to get from me is you're going to get 100% accountability. Like when I make a mistake, I'll be the first to stand up and say, guys, like I blew it on this. Like I screwed up, here's what my rationale was or what my thinking was. But like, I blew it. I blew it on this one. So like, here's what we're going to do instead and keep moving forward. But yeah, be a leader in the role that you're in. Don't get caught up in the title.
So many times people are looking beyond the turn, and crash into the wall. You look at the turn you're on, do it with excellence, and it will be noticed. And look for those opportunities to solve problems where you are. Be that leader, even without title. I've promoted a lot of people, and it's usually when I look down into the organization, I look at the people that have already are doing what I'm going to need them to do as a leader anyway. Makes it really easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I first became a manager, a director, he drew this X on a whiteboard, and he's like, okay, congratulations, everyone. This is your first management position. You've been promoted. This is great. He's like, this line going from bottom left to top right, like that is your career. This line going from top left to bottom right, he's like, that's your work-life balance, and so as you go up, your work-life balance goes down, and you have to determine for yourself where those lines intersect. At what point am I happy in my career and I'm also happy in my personal life? Because I think if you just focus too much on one and not enough on the other, that's what ultimately gets you into trouble and makes for a miserable life.
Yeah, no, I think I've never seen it as the X. I've always seen the circle, of, the five, attributes, and you try to keep balance so the wheels moving smooth. But I like that X reminds me of back in the economics class. I get to that, that equilibrium, what is your equilibrium? And it changes over time, by the way,
it changes over time.
Two small kids at home. It's a different world than when you're single.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So last question for you, and this one's kind of a fun one for you, Jim, is your favorite superhero and why?
Yeah. Again, if I'm going to walk my talk, I mean, I think Captain America, and I say Captain America because I think he leads with integrity. He's not the guy who has to be, the smartest in the room or the one with the most gadgets in the room, but he's definitely the one that leads with integrity and is always trying to do the right thing the right way. And so, yeah, if I had to pick one favorite superhero, it'd be Captain America.
And he's got a really cool shield.
Exactly.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, thanks so much for coming and joining us on this Leadership Live. It's been really a pleasure. I know I have taken some good nuggets. It's reflected on some of the things that I know I've got to continue to be a better leader on. So thank you for providing that. And I know other people are listening, both aspiring and current leaders can have benefited a lot from this. So thank you for taking the time.
No, thanks so much for the conversation, Joe. I thoroughly enjoyed it and look forward to speaking again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.